right, let's bring in political analyst Thobani Zikalala, who joins us now via video link just to unpack the MK Party media briefing held earlier today. Thobani, thank you so much for your time. A highly anticipated press briefing, of course, just given the expectations to see, firstly, just how the party will formulate its, top leadership and also announce its more stable structure, just given the criticism in terms of where's the direction the party is taking. And of course, the other question was, where would the party position the EFF's former Deputy President Floyd Shivambu? Before we get into actually what Zuma had to say, let's start with Floyd Shivambu now being the national organizer of the party. Some, of course, heckling that position, but it is a crucial position to hold, especially for Floyd and his background.
Good afternoon, Unachi, and good afternoon to your viewers. I mean, Floyd, as I've said in some other platforms, is maybe the most powerful organizer in the South African political landscape because of how many duties have been put and crafted into that position. I mean, Floyd has been given head of governance, monitoring what happens in Parliament. He has been given head of policy. He has been given political education, commissar. Excuse me. And because of that, he has been given almost the whole running of the day-to-day running of the party, because everything that is being mentioned in that position is what really many political parties do on a daily basis. I mean, of course, I think also many people have seen maybe Floyd may regret the decision. I think Floyd, when he was brought in, he already knew what position he's going to take. And I think in above just looking for a title, what Floyd did was to look for responsibility, and he's being given much responsibility, he's given much political space to be able to do that work. And I think it bodes well for the Umkhonto we Party, because we have almost all of us have been criticizing how they're almost chaotic in terms of how they've organized themselves, and for them to bring someone as experienced as Floyd, of course, also it's another chance for Floyd to prove himself outside of the shade of Julius Malema and the EFF, because maybe his skills as an organizer has not been seen outside of that, because every time in the EFF, all the credit has always gone to Julius Malema. So now he's in a space that almost would give him a space for him to start something from the ground, because we all know that the MK Party has struggled with building what's called grassroots structures. And in building to 2026, his biggest responsibility will be to make sure that the structures are then they're fully functional, and will be able now to test his acumen as a political leader, and of course as an organizer. And for me, as I've said, this is a very powerful position that's been given. I mean, it seems even more powerful than what was given in the EFF.
Interesting remarks there. Let's look at the other, people that have made it onto what I call the top 8, and of course what they're calling the high command officials. Of course, President Jacob Zuma retains that position as the leader of the MK Party, Deputy President being Dr. John Hlophe, and the Secretary General, Dr. Sfiso Maseko, Deputy Secretary General Nombuso Mkhize. Of course, the question about the women in the leadership of the MK, are they fully represented, came out there on the floor. And of course, as we've been talking, Nkosinathi Nhleko is a national chairperson, as well as Treasurer General Menzi Makubane, and the list goes on. But what do you then make of that list? One of the questions, of course, that came out is that, in terms of just structuring this particular leadership, to what extent, was the foresight in as far as the future of the party is concerned? Because the party did also mention in that press briefing that they are now looking at the local government elections for 2026. So they are saying that this is the leadership that will actually take them through those elections and make sure that on the ground they have those structures in place.
They've presented, for a party that is new, that is trying to organize themselves. I think I hear the appeal from former President Jacob Zuma and the president of the MK Party, where he says we seem to be very harsh into this political party. It's a political party that has always been there. But of course, because of the impact had and how they've entered this political landscape, we're almost forced to be very critical, because the potential that they seem to have is not met up by how much organized they are as a party. And it bodes well for them to announce a complete structure, to announce a structure that at least they give a tenure that says it can only it will be the one that takes them to the local government, because that at least gives them time to work and give some sort of stability, which is something that some of us have been critical of, that the MK party has not been able to present a very stable affair. But of course, as the president of the party is saying, it's also because maybe the party is new. And with regards to some of the names, of course, people like Kosina Sentlego are experienced politicians who have been in the leadership of the ANC and the like. But of course, on the other hand, I mean, I'm not really convinced, and I must say very honestly, I'm not really convinced on the SG position, whether or not they've got someone who can really be an engine room of the party. But if you look at it also, that SG position seems almost ceremonial in terms of how it is structured, because almost all the party, the power, I mean, of the day-to-day running of the party seems to reside with the national organizer. And the SG seems to almost be a ceremonial position, like an ornament of some sort. I mean, it doesn't seem, in terms of how they've articulated, to have real responsibilities, which we have seen with other SGs in the party. And I think he will have to have a lot of proving himself, because if you look at the political landscape in South Africa, I mean, that position of the SG, as much as it's critical, but I believe that the bar has almost gone down in terms of the acumen that is needed for people who occupy that position. I mean, you can look across the political spectrum without mentioning people's names, but I mean, it seems to me that the crux of that organization will be rested with the national organizer position where Floyd is.
Yeah, and I think some of those.
To the composition, I mean.
Yeah, no, continue with regards to the composition.
With regard to the composition, with the gender dynamics, of course, and representation, I mean, I'm very sympathetic to that view that says women and men must be able to lead and be able, especially women, knowing that, of course, that we have a history that have denied women the possibility or the chance, opportunities to lead, and that is taken. And I mean, that is very important. But also, it must not seem as if it's a superimposition. I mean, it must be something that is organic to the party, and maybe the party must take serious the idea of how its gender politics, I mean, as a party, is constructed and communicated. And it will not only be communicated in terms of words, but also in terms of representation in key leadership positions, so that women can feel as if the MK party is their party too, in terms of how, because currently it seems as if it's a very no-male-dominated party with what you call limited inclusion, especially representation at the high command. I mean, the top 8 of the party has got 1 woman, and that should be concerning. But also, we must also look at the fact that we do not want to make the gender struggle and the gender politics a ceremonial, token-based issue. It must be real fundamental, in that even without the representation of women, the party must always still continue to speak progressive gender politics. That do not need for a female to be the one standing on the podium for such progressive gender politics to be spoken. The party must imbue itself with real radical proper gender politics. And I think for me, that's the biggest concern.
Point taken. I want to also just quickly touch on just some of the things that we also heard during that press conference. Of course, Dr. John Hlophe had the opportunity to address some questions. He denied criticism, that of claims that the MK party is out to destroy the EFF. Of course, that's the Floyd Shivambu question. But also Floyd took to the podium to answer a question, but used that opportunity to give a speech that seems to have been responding and addressing to the statements that were made earlier by Julius Malema, saying things like he will never betray the revolution, and that he joined a party that will afford a space of no dictatorship, but rather of political discussions. I mean, when we listen to those words, and when we see, of course, there's still a little bit of uncertainty as it relates to the EFF party and what that means to the Progressive Caucus. What can we read into this? I mean, are we going to see 2 parties working side by side going forward? Is there going to be some form of, coalition or partnership? Where do the stakes lie?
Without anything being said, I mean, Floyd had to respond, and that must always be taken. Floyd had to respond. Julius Malema, quickly after having said in the press conference of the EFF, the EFF will not insult or will not parade Floyd. Quickly, a few days later, convinced an event which clearly, in terms of the listening of that speech, was to attack Floyd or to respond to the Floyd leaving the party and joining the MK party. Floyd had to take that opportunity. It's imperative for one to not leave such space. I mean, he had to respond. And of course, the way Floyd responds, he responds in typical fashion of how Floyd almost always does things. I mean, he doesn't go as direct as Julius will go, but he tries to characterize a new party, while of course that is a criticism of the party that he comes from, that the EFF has become a dictatorship. The EFF does not allow for democratic discussions, and the idea of selling out the revolution or selling out individuals over above selling out revolutions. I mean, it can be said that as individuals, and I think that Floyd was going, we are loyal to ideas over above formations, and the idea of revolution. I mean, as what Floyd was saying, if it's not betrayed, if it's not betrayed, you can't accuse. And of course, unless you have then equated the revolution to yourself,
Thobani,
that if I betray.
Thobani, we have run out of time, but thank you so much. I think we got the gist of it. And of course, let's not forget that the MK party is still also facing other challenges internally with those 18 MK party members that were dismissed. But thank you so much for your time, Thobani Zikalala, weighing in there, of course, on that announcement by the MK party earlier in terms of its leadership.